Groovy. So intro's done. So what we're going to talk about today, and feel free to ask questions in the chat. Fire them through. All the questions and answers part, and the people in the chat who are not talking will jump through and ask there. So 4 big areas to kick off with. So when we think about AI, obviously we're thinking about it in the terms of our sphere of learning, knowledge, comms, and it's great having both Ritu, that's an ex-L&D practitioner, an HR practitioner, Lynn, who looks at it holistically as a chief HRO, so looking at with that inclusivity angle, the learning perspective and comms and knowledge and business productivity. So I think great to get all those views in. So, and from a Fuse angle, we're thinking about everyone, how do we evolve those stories that we have about making, using AI to allow us to accelerate the journey towards learning the flow and the productivity benefits that bring? How do we accelerate our goals on inclusivity and more accessibility? Now, how do we start to drive the hyper-personalization and more engagement? And at the same time, also take away some of those stuff we don't like to do. So with that in mind, I'm hitting the first one. So just hitting this first section around learning the flow and the productivity benefits. I don't think it's fair to do any presentation without bringing Charles in. So I love Charles Jennings' 70-20-10. Obviously, it's influenced our thinking upon how do we think about learning holistically. And I think some of the research that he was showing recently was this statistic, which it used to be 50% of what we used to do our job was stored in our heads. And that's now less than 10% and potentially in many roles down to less than 5%. And so now access to knowledge and access to the right knowledge and the right information moment need really is a differentiator. And that's why we believe technology to allow us to access that learning and knowledge in the flow is such a key thing now to drive productivity benefits and competitive advantage. So that's the first section we're really going to dive in. What I thought I'd do to start off with is just to quickly give a bit of context, just a quick video that can hopefully accelerate some understanding about this type of AI and what we're talking about.
That's why we're really excited for Fuse's launch of generative AI answers to solve all of these problems. And for our customers' raw content, including 500-page PDF training manuals, SOPs in files, videos, and articles, this will all be automatically indexed by our generative AI in the background. Generative AI within Fuse transforms everything said or written that has been uploaded into Fuse into a highly intelligent AI database with no manual input, surpassing the capabilities of traditional performance support technologies. What previously demanded substantial time and cost can now be achieved effortlessly, straight out of the box with Fuse, starting from this quarter. At a base level, users of Fuse can type Google-like searches and extract the best answer from your corporate brain, significantly improving the task done well and no longer relying on hoping your teams remember everything they may need to know to do their job. Generative AI is smarter than you and can construct answers from different parts of your corporate brain to answer questions that have never been asked before. And one more thing, you can now ask any question of your knowledge in any language without translating.
So actually, maybe there was an audio thing. I might just want to share that again, making sure I click the relevant button that goes through. So just to hit a few points around this, and maybe what I'd just do is a quick demo just to show what we mean in that. But actually, maybe Lynn, while I do that, and giving you a chance maybe to, I guess to some degree, we talked about this before. Obviously, we're living in an AI, Fuse is living in an AI world every day, and we're living in the future of an AI world. So we often get a little bit too excited, think everybody's at the same level we are. You made the point of saying, if I ask you when we talk about AI, it would be great for you to put forward your language and your thinking upon how's this available for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is the thing is, as an individual, I don't necessarily know or want to know how this all works. What I really want to know is what's the benefit for me, my colleagues, my organization. And so the way I often think about AI is that I can have this brilliant, and anybody can have this brilliant, really effective assistant with them all of the time, which saves me time, effort, thinking. I don't have to retain loads of information or know where to look for stuff. I've just got this amazing assistant, this virtual assistant who can help me with everything. And so I think about it very much as what can be done to make my life easier, quicker, more effective, and therefore from a business point of view, what business benefits can I get from this brilliant technology without having to understand any of it. So in the simplest form, for me, I look at AI as an assistant, but that everybody can have. And everyone who works in any job in any organization can have an assistant that's relevant to their job role and their business to help them to be even more effective at the job that they do. And I guess the second thing I would say is, for me, I'm not starting with what is AI and what's the technology. I'm starting with what are the business challenges or opportunities, and is there a way for me to use this to help me with that, to create performance at the end of the day. And a lot of that could be around knowledge and what we might see as learning, but for me it's much broader than that, which is how do we face into business challenges and opportunities by leveraging this. And if that's in a sort of pure learning world, then great, but actually it's much more broad for me in terms of these are business tools, and this is a really exciting business tool to deliver on those performance goals.
And yeah, I appreciate that. And I think to the point that our journey over the last year, even though we were AI ready a little bit while back, was especially with generative AI, which has taken us by storm, what's the specific problems that we can solve that is, I guess, has the biggest value. And I think to that first one, that's why we just wanted to focus a little bit more around this first area. And if I just show maybe just a couple of examples, right? So this is slide fuse on that back of that video. If we have a whole bunch of customer content in our version here, and that's, I might show it, so make sure I'm showing the whole screen. Yeah, and if you see my screen, okay?
Yeah.
So if I ask the question, for example, how is the Lotus 260 Elite Cup, which is the car, improved from the previous model, then it's going to look across this whole database of knowledge. And this might be a sales rep that's in front of a client and trying to quickly get some information to have a high quality conversation with a customer. So inside here, it's be able to look at all those massive materials, manuals, videos, and so forth, courses, and help me actually in that moment of need pull out that specific information that I need. So it's moving us away from having to try to train people to retain everything, knowing that all this capability and all this knowledge is available. So here's a few other search terms I've just done to save myself having to put them all through. So if I take the second one, which is, how do I explain? Again, I think Panasonic has 500 page training manuals. And again, this one here is actually just a technical training manual, but I've asked a question here around, explain to me in 50 words how to best explain this new camera. And again, it's looked at that whole manual, consolidated it, given me some tips to kind of talk through and to go through. Right the way. So if you like, the first couple of examples there were kind of factual based questions. The second ones could be more the series of questions we think about or knowledge, or answers are more procedural, such as how do I change the lens on a Panasonic camera? And again, just a couple of steps though, but again, within 3 or 4 seconds, I don't have to figure that out. The latest, most relevant information is there. And obviously our customers are in control of that data. They're in control of what it sees. It's not looking at the external web. It's just looking internally at the manuals that they're making sure are the latest, most recent, up-to-date information inside of that. All the way through to, let's say, hospitality clients that maybe, how do you make a mojito? Or how do you make a cupcake? Right now our team's recording, I think, 100 odd videos from one of our hospitality clients on basically the best way of doing hospitality. So again, inside here, if you've got the way to make a mojito or make a cupcake, it's going to be able to actually extract out your way, of doing that.
Steve, sorry, I don't know if it's the same for everybody else, but suddenly your screen has gone very blurry and I can't see the text. Can anybody else? Anyone else?
Me too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So that's good to know. I'm not sure what to do about that. It's probably my internet bandwidth from the place I'm at. But maybe what I'll do is I'll just jump back into the slide deck in between. But I think we kind of get the point there, right? That we're able to, in essence, now make a corporate brain. So with Fuse a lot, we were talking about corporate brains. But now what's happening is we've made that corporate brain smart. The ability to interact with it, to talk to it, to get information out from it, and to have that assistant for every learner, professional that happens in an organization. And if we, and this was just sharing these 3 types of questions we have, right? So factual questions, procedural questions, explanatory type questions, such as, I've got a development conversation with a manager, how should I help prepare? So all that great knowledge and that great courseware, training materials that's created now has a much longer lease of life and is able to provide a much greater value, if you like, to individuals through that.
Steve, you've got some grey blocks that are covering some of the presentation. I think they're your presenter keys. You just need to move them off the screen.
Oh, sure. I think it's just at the top there. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, and there's one on the right as well.
And that's you guys.
We can't see that. We just looks grey.
Is that good now?
Yeah, better.
Okay. Yeah. So these are just examples of, I guess when we think about the ability to be that assistant to our learners, to help them accelerate during onboarding, during their lives, the factual questions, procedural questions, the explanation type questions that are going through. So hopefully that gives a little bit of background to some of the first part of the technology we'll talk about before we get into the other bits of AI. But maybe question out to Lynn and to Ritu. I mean, really, I think interesting to hear your part that now you're starting to see what the technology can do in this space of learning the flow. How do you see that potentially creating value to business?
Yeah, do you want to go first, Ritu, or shall I?
Don't mind. So I see it as, one of the biggest costs is training people from the moment you get them through the door, so day one, all the way through to get them optimum for their jobs and their roles. And as Steve's already mentioned, some of that training can be, it's chunky, it's clunky, it might not be adapted to suit the learning preferences of the individual, which will come more on later. But really about generative AI is actually the quick searchability, the quick answer to get the information you need when you need it. So it's just in time to enable you to do that piece of work or that skill that you need for that particular moment in time. I think for me, that's the key thing. I come from working in a variety of industries, and some of them are, service frontline people. And actually, if you're with a customer on a customer site, you don't always have time when you're serving the customer to look up different ways of doing your particular piece of action. So if you've got generative AI, which can give you the answer within a few key steps, you've just saved yourself a huge amount of time while you're on customer site. So again, adding value back to the bottom line in terms of time.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think, there are a number of practical applications for me where it just makes sense. But if you take that sort of colleague happiness point as well and engagement, enabling colleagues to spend time on really value-adding activity where they can apply their skills and experience and they can, be interested. It's a brilliant way to keep them further engaged. So, whether it's repetitive activities or it's, doing something that might take a long time that becomes much quicker, it's much more engaging for colleagues. We'll come on to it a bit later as well on inclusion, but if you make it easy for a lot of different people to do their roles, it's going to be really engaging for them rather than them having to jump through hoops or try and move barriers that are in the way for them. From a business perspective, for me, it is, in a very commercial way about how you save time, how you drive activity, how you create consistency where it matters. So, examples for me, for example, would be, being able to say things like, please create a up-to-date job description for a deputy general manager in this kind of site with these responsibilities, and within seconds that job to be done, versus starting with a blank piece of paper going, right, how shall I word that, or whatever it might be. So there could be tasks, but from a knowledge point of view, we're really sharing the knowledge within an organization in a really safe and secure way, rather than repeating it several times in different parts of the business. So there's a real efficiency piece for me, which says you can access everything that might have been in someone's brain or in their sort of desktop and do that really quickly. You're reducing repetition, but you're also reducing bad habits where you've got lots of different people doing the same thing really differently. But I think, again, the final thing I would say is, from a colleague expectation point of view, all we're doing here is replicating some of the things that colleagues are able to do outside of work. So my example I always use is, if my tumble dryer breaks, I am not going to look for the manual in the drawer. I'm going to type something into a search. Now, imagine being able to do that about that 70% of stuff in our working life that we need to do in the flow of work. It is just so much more engaging and efficient. So for me, those are the real big things for me. With, again, as I said before, without having to understand how it works, I just love what it will do for us.
Yeah, there's a couple of questions which maybe I'll just maybe touch on quickly, right? So there's a question from Cocker, which is, how do you make sure that the answers are the most recent, up to date? And there's a couple of things here, right? So it is just technology in the end of the day, right? So if you put a whole bunch of inaccurate content into it and you ask and the system automatically indexes bad content, then it's going to give answers from bad content, right? So there is, though we hear a lot about AI taking away jobs, there are new skills and new roles that it's going to do. One, undoubtedly, right, one of the responsibilities is going to be to make sure the content is accurate. So obviously on our side, we can do so much in the technology. So we can, for example, use our algorithms to make sure that more recent content is more relevant, that that is populated, that it's more likely to give an accurate answer from something that is recently created on a certain question, or that content is more popular. So we can use a whole variety of algorithms. We are obviously making sure that we're only looking at internal content, not the public web, because we can't control the public web. And we can also make sure that content is only looked at, is only indexed on answers from certain places on the platform where we know it's good content, rather than, let's say, all the social learning content. But you still have to make sure, for example, if somebody uploads, it's the same as anything, right? If somebody uploads a bad course or a bad video or a bad article that's incorrect onto a platform, then this is still going to suffer the same things. It's just going to do it faster, right? So, and it's going to do it more often because more people are going to find it. At the same time, we also have to recognize that majority of problems that go wrong in companies where problems go wrong is because somebody's asking someone, because it's too hard to get the information from something like this. So this has the potential to solve the problem, but it's not a simple magic bullet, right? That means that it's going to make inaccurate content all of a sudden become good. Maybe there's a couple of other points that came in there. Does Fuse AI operate on a predetermined index and data provided by the client? How, for example, a Google search engine extension might be embedded? Yeah, so good question, Ronnie. So we index the content, right? So we're indexing everything. So maybe there's a quick slide here, actually, which naturally flows into this conversation point. So if I take this slide here, and let's see if, I know I keep getting these black bars. So actually, Iman's just going to come over and help me to minimize these black bars. Can you help me here, come on? I think there's a...
Learning in the flow of work.
There we go. I did actually ask ChatGPT how to sort something else out, and it helped me. But those three black bars there. If I, yeah, there we go. Learning the flow, and I didn't even need AI for that. So on the first part, so that's what you saw there, right?
Yep.
Yeah, phew. Okay, just make sure, because I can't see you anymore. So the first part is to understand is the technology we're doing is using the same technology that's on the public web, but it's only used in a private way. So what Fuse is doing is it's crawling all the content that's stored in Fuse, and that's authorized connected locations towards it, which might be a website, but it's only authorized places. So all of the documents, the files, the videos which we transcribe, that's what becomes part of the index. Along with anything else that you want to connect to, like a LinkedIn or a Udemy or a third-party part towards it. And then what we're doing is we're doing the same thing as ChatGPT does or Google does on the public web, is that we're then creating an AI index of that on our servers, not public servers, on exactly the same servers where your text-based stuff sits, the new AI index now sits. And that's what we then use to use the full functionality of generative AI and all the other different AIs that we use. So, and maybe there's one slide which no, I'll pop for that. Let me just jump out to see I think there's one other question that came out, so I just wanted to pop that through. Yeah, no, I think that's good. I think that's good for that piece there. So let's just jump through and carry on that piece now. There we go. And hide floating. Oh, sorry, I missed the button. Hide floating controls. There we go. Okay. So just pitch on a bit again. So in the implementation of Fuse, to the question that was asked, what happens is it kind of combines that kind of learning platform, LMS, YouTube, and Google ChatGPT style approach in one interface. So if you ask a question such as create a pivot table, then our system's going to think, okay, you're looking for a video or a course, but probably a video. Because most learning isn't going to be saying, I want to do a course and create a pivot table. I just want to get back and watch a video inside that. So we would go and as it shows on the new interface, go and find that video, and then select that person and go through that in that YouTube style experience that we have today. However, if they ask a question such as, how do I create a pivot table, then the AI understands, okay, that's a question, you're looking for an answer, and therefore what I'm going to do here is I'm going to extract out the answer from the different locations to actually give you that step-by-step instruction, along with showing to you where the videos came from, which if you want to click on and get more in depth, or it could be doesn't have to be a video, it could be a file or a document or a training manual, and it's going to allow you to say, these are the 3 or 4 sources I got the information from, so you can now click on them if you want to get more depth, or double check to make sure that what it extracted out was technically correct. And obviously, feedback wise, you've got that kind of thumbs up, thumbs down, the ability to comment and give feedback to the admins to make sure that you're happy, you're getting feedback, or actually maybe you found something that was inaccurate, and it might not be because the AI has done anything wrong, it's just because the content was inaccurate. So you can flag it, tell them, and away you go. If I just explain a little bit more about the technology, so one of the things we love about it is that concept that it's not just finding an answer like an FAQ, which you have one answer to one question, but the ability to, if you ask new questions that have never been answered before, it has the ability to create that answer from multiple locations, such as the question on the page here, allow the actual answer exist in a video and a file from different experts, so it understands that, brings that together, and dynamically creates that answer from the multiple sources of accurate information that's come through there. The other really cool thing about it is, by default, it's also universal language, because the data is stored in not just in text format, but in kind of in numbers in essence, right? And numbers is a universal language. It means that actually any data that's stored in French or German or Hindi, you could ask in Japanese and it would actually give you the answer from all those people. So it's really democratizing knowledge and democratizing learning, and really hitting that fused vision of everyone learning from everyone, or having the ability to learn from everyone. So I think that's a good starting place, maybe to give an understanding of that first section, and maybe just to Ritu and to Lynn here, right? I think there's an interesting part that says, well, what is this potentially looking to replace or improve? And maybe the question to you guys as the practitioners, currently what happens in your companies, right, or the companies you've worked in the past, what do you think people actually do when they don't know what to do?
So often I've seen, if they can't access the platform, if they can't get the information from the platform, if it's not quick enough, if it hasn't got what they need in terms of the pathway to get there, they'll often ask their colleagues, their managers, as the next go-tos. I don't know about you, Lynn.
Yeah, exactly the same. And I think that, if you think about an office environment or a logistics environment or retail, in my background, it is very much who's closest to me that might know the answer. The limitations of that, and sometimes that's good, but the limitations of that is that you often get bad habits or inaccurate processes or long-winded ways to affect something, to do something, that then just grows arms and legs. So for me, it is that alternative is just to ask someone who may or may not know the right answer, may or may not do something in the best way. Or again, someone tries to sort of figure it out themselves or through external resources, and takes a very long time to be able to do that. And again, it might not be efficient. But yeah, that typical sort of turn to my left, turn to my right and ask someone who might know would be the alternative.
Steve, you're on mute.
You're on mute.
I think people always want that button for me. Yeah, I think that is it, right? And I think actually there's a cool slide. I think that was I think it was just quite funny, because I do remember actually walking through an environment where sorry, just finding the little flying button thing again. I remember walking past a shop where actually the shop was had the line on it saying "closed for training," which I thought was the most anti-customer centric approach, and probably the opposite of what training and learning is from. And the same bit, as you said, when I was influenced by a piece of research I did before Fuse, which when I asked 100 people in a company, it's actually BT, when you don't know how to do your job, where do you go? And the answer was somebody else. It wasn't the platforms, the content that was good, but too hard to get to. And I think, again, what's happened is technologies like Google, ChatGPT, those are become our go-to places. And obviously the big belief is now, if we can make it as easy and as accurate as those consumer tools and our learning lives, then I think we massively increase the ability to go to our learning platforms on a regular basis. So just jumping through some other thoughts around that, right? So actually, sorry, there was one quick question I just want to come back to, right? So there was a question that was asked, which is around, do you have on your roadmap integrated ability to automatically create a learning path? So yeah, the essence is yes, right? But more than that, and we'll talk to that. So if you think about it, what we have is a AI model of all course content metadata, but actually everything inside it as well. So we go, if you like, the ability to create a learning path is looking at titles, descriptions, tags, and so forth to create a learning path. So absolutely, if you wanted to say to Fuse even now, could you recommend videos or files for me to learn about communication skills? We're going to absolutely be able to do that, kind of almost right now. But obviously, we understand more than just the surface of what's inside it. We understand inside it. So therefore, the ability to do demos there is pretty deep inside it. There's a quick question about GPT engines. We actually used all different, I mean, it's not just GPT we use a variety of different AI models, and we use different GPT models depending upon the task that we're trying to do inside of that. So hopefully that helps a little bit on that one. And maybe just again, before I go into the next session around inclusivity, accessibility, interesting just to hit the point around what's the new skills or new roles do you think we're going to have to consider? And especially both of you, Ritu as an ex-HR leader and Lynn as a present one, what's your thoughts on that, right? Because this is inside your communications learning teams, new skill sets coming in. So what's your thoughts on new roles, new skills?
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, if I start with sort of HR and L&D professionals and then zoom out from a business perspective, not just with the advent of AI, but for a long time, my feeling is that actually we need to develop different skills and capability within learning and HR teams. So if I think about a learning team these days, I'm thinking about skills and capabilities around video, around editing, around storyboarding. It's very different to, and I think we'll all agree, sort of a traditional classroom L&D function. So there has to be much more capability in terms of digital capability within L&D teams and HR teams. The interesting thing for me is as AI becomes more prevalent in organizations is building skills and capability within specific teams that need to lead on AI, on automation. And I think, we might historically look to our IT teams, which is right to an extent, but actually for me, this is much more around organization effectiveness. So within my own team, we need to be looking at organization design alongside data, alongside AI, alongside automation, to build an organization that's really effective. So that skill set needs to be embedded into those teams that are really looking at all design and operating models. The other piece for me then is across different functions in the organization, we need to develop the ability for people to do this in the course of their work. So, if you think way back when before we had things like, I don't know, Excel, people had to learn how to use that to do their job. And I think the same will apply to AI. And so whilst there are specialists in organizations that need to be the thought leaders and the change agents on this, actually what we need to do is develop people's skills and capabilities within their functional areas and within their jobs. And so back to that point around, is AI going to replace jobs? From a headcount point of view, no, I don't think so. From an actual job design perspective, yes, because it's part of the evolution of the workforce, and this skill and capability will absolutely replace something else that might previously been, a job role, because this is part of evolution. So it's changing and developing organization versus cutting heads is my view.
I think that's definitely true. And even this concept of beforehand, accurate information was relevant. Now it's extremely relevant. So I think, how does, and again, I think about some of the roles of the people in the company, like the video guys, right? So there's this question upon, especially with these new tools like Sora, it's going to make videos automatically and so forth. But somebody's still got to go out and actually extract the tacit knowledge out of people's heads. So if I look at my team that is creating great videos of great people, that's still a skill set that's going to be done. But no doubt that AI is going to augment, and already is augmenting every aspect of that kind of design process. and also and improving every aspect towards it, from the publishing bit of how they choose a title description or a thumbnail to make it more impactful, to how they help them automatically cut down a script in post-production. But the actual recording an expert and extracting knowledge out, the best people's heads in the company, that's still a skill set that's going to be needed. Just changed. So yeah, let's just move on to the next part, right, which is around inclusivity and accessibility inside here. So again, something we're all really passionate about. And again, just now that I'm learning about my floating bar, something I know all three of us are really, really, really passionate about. And although there's lots we can talk about inclusivity, I think in this particular webinar, we want to touch on language, neurodiversity, and accessibility. And maybe first on language, right? Because I do think people perhaps don't maybe it's been such a problem for so long to be able to localize and translate content. We've forgotten that it potentially is solvable. So again, maybe Lynn, just on your side, and I thought your use case is interesting in your current role. I know you've worked in many multinational companies, but now you're working in what's predominantly a big UK organization, which I wouldn't have thought language is an issue. But tell us a little bit about why you think it is.
Yeah. So, I think in my organisation, broadly speaking, we have a number of roles which would be typically office-based roles and sort of salaried functional roles, but a huge proportion of our colleagues work in frontline roles, in hubs, in depots, processing parcels. And in our world, the important thing is actually number recognition. So in theory, we can employ a diverse group of people who can do this job really well. And we do have a whole range of nationalities working for us. Some of the challenges that we have and the problems that AI can help us fix is, if we think about our attraction, our recruitment, onboarding, induction, traditionally they have been predominantly done in English, which is not everyone's native language. And therefore, that can really preclude some people from that whole process if English is not their first language. And that's a real challenge for us in terms of not only sort of not including those people, but also we're missing out commercially from this talent pool. So what AI can help us to do, specifically talking about translation, is so quickly and easily translate documents, video, text to speech, speech to text, really quickly in any language. So historically, we might have had the top 5 spoken languages in our business within our operation, and we translate everything in terms of communication and some of the training. But actually, we were expecting our whole workforce to digest and engage with content that was predominantly in English, which is really not inclusive or effective. So what's really exciting about what we will be able to do now is really in the moment is translate anything that's written, anything that's video, into that person's native language so that they can really understand that along with everybody else. So I'll give you a very specific example. If we had recruitment and induction in someone's native language, again, we help them to be set up for success. And then a line manager who might not speak the same language as the person working in the depot needs to let them know about a process improvement or something that they need to modify right there and then. So the way that they might present a parcel and the barcode on a belt. This means someone could get out their mobile phone, could pick up the video that's about that process and could select that person's native language and immediately help them to understand and course correct in terms of that performance. We're just not able to do that, or haven't been able to do that previously. So it's very much around, specifically thinking about language, creating inclusion and that sense of belonging for that person, but for them to be able to perform well. But there's a real commercial benefit for us as well, which means we open up that talent pool, we onboard a more diverse workforce who can properly engage in the organisation and perform. So it's really important for us. Language and translation is so important for us in our organisation.
And maybe what I want to do is just again to make everyone aware of what the technology, what level we've got to the technology for now. I'm a total expert in the floating bar now. But if I just play this and show, because it has come on leaps and bounds I think in the last 6 months, especially the last 6 months especially. So just want to play a little video to give some background to how things have progressed.
We recognise the transformative power of local language
We can't see the video.
We can't see the video.
learning culture. Everyone, regardless of their background, should be able to learn from anyone, top down or peer to peer.
A native tongue for optimize the transformative power of local language learning in fostering an inclusive learning culture. Everyone, regardless of their background, should be able to learn from anyone, top down or peer to peer, in their native tongue for optimal understanding and engagement. However, the high cost of translation has historically been a major barrier to achieving this vision. Until now. Fuse has been at the forefront of AI translation for the past 5 years, and recent advancements have empowered us to take a quantum leap forward. We're not just talking about incremental improvements, we're talking about removing language as a barrier to learning altogether. This means true democratization of learning for all, and a significant step towards achieving genuine inclusivity. With this in mind, we're upgrading multiple AI engines to achieve the following. First, our AI speech-to-text engine, which automatically generates our transcriptions and subtitles. We're transitioning to a new engine which improves accuracy across languages from 98% to close to 100%. It utilizes a smarter AI engine that can better predict unclear words and have a far better understanding of grammar. Accurate transcriptions are key to allowing the next step to automatic translation. One full stop in the wrong place can lead to the next 2 sentences being translated completely incorrectly. Likewise, it is the transcript from the video that feeds the corporate brain for AI answers and AI coaches, so accuracy is key. Next, we're moving away from Google Translate for a next generation engine which delivers clear text-to-text translation for articles, subtitles, and comments. All of these will be translated with far greater accuracy. But we're not stopping there. We'll soon be introducing file translation, which will be able to take any of your PDF files that reside on Fuse and in one click localize the content into another language version. Alongside file translation, we are now in the testing stage with customers for our new automated AI video to video translation, and transform that same video into your local language using cloned AI or synthetic voices, just like this.
I'm Kiran. Today we'll be breaking down decimal notation and place value. Namaste, मैं रिकार्डिन हूँ. आज हम दशमलव संकेतन और स्थानीय मान को तोड़ेंगे.
Ultimately reducing the time and cost of localizing video by 99% and taking another huge step forward to creating an inclusive learning culture.
Yeah, so hopefully that gave a little flavor for, I guess, where this technology is going. And for those who I don't know on the webinar, that was my twin. Not actually twins, because I do have identical twins, and although obviously they do talk each other about as clones, we're not talking about that type of cloning. We're talking about just voice cloning, where we've used his voice to then create a smoother version and then actually then localize his voice. Again, one button technology. We use that for our Fuse School channel around that part towards it. So I think the question there for Jonathan, how far can AI go in automated translations in e-learning, especially more technical subjects that do not translate one-to-one? So this is where we're basically embedding now custom dictionaries, in towards the translation engine. So therefore, that's what we're finding is the only thing that doesn't get us close to 100% around that part is where it comes to customer specific language. So by inserting that customer specific language, we get there pretty close now with that automated transcription of the new AI that's for that and the new type of AI for translation. Ritu, on to the next section, right, which I know is you've been waiting for, and obviously is your passion area. And let me just get to that part there with the slides. So I just want to just get to your slides for me in the background. But do you want to give a little bit of background why to do that, Ritu, just in terms of why this is your passion area?
Yeah, absolutely. So as Steve mentioned, I come from a corporate background within HR and HR tech, and I've transitioned over the last 4 years into specifically working around neurodiversity. For those people who might not be aware of the term neurodiversity, we're talking about neurological variances that are different from typical cognitive functioning. So the way your brain works, the way you're wired as an individual. And why is this important when we talk about learning and development? Because of course, we all have different preferences of how we engage with information, how we absorb and process that information. So I'll wait for Steve. You got the slides up with the
Yeah. So let me just as I'm getting them up. So let me just give you a bit of a drum roll before I kind of give. So again, from a Fuse perspective, and again, let me just take this down. So from a Fuse perspective, we think upon this journey of hyper personalization and neurodiversity as being one of the aspects that allows us to really understand it. Ultimately, we're not all the same, and I think just to introduce this next slide. I'm that hasn't come across. I know I hide it really well, but as an ADHD person, I recognize that I prefer to learn differently, than someone else, right? So I know Ritu, letting everyone know you're autistic, right? But between the two of us, we probably really learn differently, right? So I definitely prefer to learn in a bite-sized fashion. Social learning for me is a great way to socially to bounce ideas of other people. Put me in a classroom, right, which in a structured environment, I'm just going to disrupt the classroom, whether that's as an adult or whether that's as a kid. I probably spent more time outside the classroom and even being told to sit outside it, which not great personalized learning, for my journey towards it. And as an ex-trainer, it was really hard if I had someone like me in a classroom asking, whose brain is answering a question from the back of the manual, someone that was autistic at the front of it saying, well, why are you answering a question that's not on the next page or the current page? Versus a dyslexic person that's going to say, well, I definitely don't want to be reading a 500-page manual, but give it to me in an auditory sense or a visual sense is going to be much more interesting. So I just want to hit that before, I guess, Ritu, then you go through and kind of give that more depth perspective.
Yeah, and absolutely. And I just want to point out that obviously we're generalizing here what the common learning preferences are for some of the neurological conditions that we just saw on the previous slide. But of course, everyone is different, and some people might have co-occurrences, i.e. more than one preference or variation. But what's the problem that we're seeing then from a learning perspective when it comes to neurodiversity? So obviously with neurodiversity being quite an early movement, there's still a lack of education around neurodiversity, and that directly relates to learning preferences. So a lot of clients we work with, for example, will talk about the learning content they have sitting within their platform, and they'll have one really great piece of engaging content that they put everyone through, and that engaging piece might have some parts that are written and some parts that are clickable and some parts that are gamified, but it's still just one piece that they put everyone through. So actually what they haven't done is they haven't accounted for neurodiversity. They haven't accounted for the way people absorb information, because they're making everyone go through one piece that they've defined as engaging. And usually when we're saying they defined it as engaging, we're talking about design teams that typically include neurotypical thinkers and therefore haven't designed with accessibility in mind. And let's go to the second point around language. I mean, Lynn mentioned lots about language and about the translation of language. When we talk about neurodiversity, we're talking about inclusive language, which is slightly different. So what we're talking about is the way in which people talk about neurodiversity, the inclusive language people expect to see, and how AI can also work on that. So we're seeing with AI, AI can actually be used to create inclusive frameworks, and it can use that inclusive language then from those inclusive frameworks within the content. So within the transcriptions and things that Steve mentioned earlier. So there is a variation in the language used when we talk about neurodiversity, and there is differences in accepted terminology. So again, when we talk about the corporate brain and your corporate brain, it's about defining what that language and what that framework looks like, so that all the pieces of content that connect to that generative AI are linked to that inclusive framework. So next slide, please, Steve. And again, what we're seeing in terms of problematic or challenging areas is around the learning environment, right? So when we talk about platforms, then we're talking about digital accessibility. So the tools, the way in which people can access the platform. So you might have people who might have issues with visual impairment. You might have people with issues with reading. You might have people with issues with font sizes, colors, etc., imagery. And so it's about the tool itself. Can the tool be accessible? And then it's about looking at people. So what do people need? Do people need a variety of methods? So for example, the tool you might be able to change the way the fonts are laid out, but as a person, I might need that, plus I might need the transcription. Can I do both? Or is it just one at a time? So one's looking at the tools in the learning environment, one's looking at the needs, the accessibility needs of people, and then how you implement that within the learning environment. And then if we look at learning content, so I just touched on this briefly, but that, many learning teams nowadays, and I think Lynn alluded to this when we talked about skills and capabilities of the learning and development team, there is at the moment what we're seeing a lack of accessibility in design. And so what we need to now think about is when we're building content, especially when we're looking at AI that's going to be pulling all those pieces of content, how do we make it more accessible? What are the things we need to consider to ensure that we're hitting all the variety of different thinkers that absorb that information in different ways? And, by not doing that, we're actually excluding a key demographic that probably already exists within the workforce, and therefore their learning needs are not met. So how do we do it? And Steve, if you click to the next slide. So essentially, we're looking at three key components, right? So I mentioned one already around the inclusive language framework and how we can get AI to generate some of that inclusive language framework and generate that language within the content, within the transcriptions that it'll be generating. Then we look at an accessibility framework. So this is things like fonts, colors, animation, imagery, looking at those things and how do we make that more inclusive? And again, you can use AI. Steve already alluded to some of this already, that you can use AI to help with scripts, you can use AI to help with grammar and other pieces like that. And the key bit, the real key bit, is this third point here around multiple formats for each piece of content, which can be supercharged by AI. And what we mean by that is the example I gave earlier, where you could have one piece of content that has different engaging elements, but you're making everybody go through that. Actually, it's about breaking that up. You can have one message, but you have multiple varieties of content for that one message. So you have a written format, you have a video format, you have the video format has transcription, you have a clickable format, whatever else, so that you appease these specialist thinkers, these neurodivergent thinkers, and include them within the learning because they're learning in a way that they absorb and take in information.
And I think it's worth highlighting, right, that in some organizations, especially where those have a heavy frontline worker place, and I know one of our clients, one of our partners, Remit Training, which does apprenticeship training, I think they do analysis of neurodiversity in their initial assessments, and 30% of the learners that come into their programs are neurodiverse. So we're not talking about an insignificant audience here that should be considered. And I think for most of us who have kids, we could probably appreciate the fact that one-dimensional learning, whether it's at training or at work, probably isn't. It's the best thing we can do with the tools that are available. What AI does to us is the ability to change the landscape inside that, which is really interesting. And to give that example, how does that then technology starts to come? Well, if we take a bit of technology, for example, like FuseFlow, which is a browser extension. So it's a browser extension. When you click on it, it will automatically look at who you are and all the content available, and it will match that. So it's been doing that before for a while without the AI. But obviously now with a much better predicting engine and the ability to understand the content far deeper, to in essence index the content in the way we know, and now to index everything we know about the person, the ability to predict that type of knowledge. So based upon, it knows, for example, your job role, your skills and knowledge gaps, the task you're doing on the screen, your neurodiversity, and therefore we are getting to a place where we're just hitting each of these parts. So we know that 1, 2, 3 we do already. Number 4, now we're starting the R&D process thing. How do you change the language that then information is given to you based upon all the individual preferences, even down to actually your reading age and literacy age, which you find massively interesting. So before I jump into the last section, just wanted to see if there's any questions coming through or any other points that maybe Lynn, I know Lynn, you're also enthusiastic in this area, that you want to come in there as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think just to build on that in the broadest sense, that ability to personalize and include is so important. And I think that commercial edge that businesses get by being able to do that is really significant. And it's just sort of logical. There's a bit of me that sort of thinks, oh, why are we only just talking about this? Because it's just illogical to think that each of us can learn in the same way and perform in the same way. And I just think this whole capability now gives businesses the potential, if they get on the front foot with it, to be really leading edge in terms of being a really attractive employer for a variety of different people, but also their commercial performance can really step up as a result of it.
Any other questions quick on, is the localization proprietary of Fuse? Yeah, in essence, we use a mixture of technologies and then we integrate together and then add a few other bits and pieces. So it's a bit of a Colonel secret recipe of but instead of being herbs and spices, it's AI devices. And does the system track analytics? Yeah, absolutely. Everything is, there's 350 odd data points that we're tracking as we go through. So just onto the last section, and hopefully all my screens are all okay this time. And now I guess if we look at learning and structured learning or any type of form of learning, we hopefully, I think everyone would agree that the best type of learning is the individual. So if you go back to the classroom, the more people you've got in a classroom, probably the worse experience it is for each student. And that's the same in adult as it is for kids. So if we think about the ultimate learning environment is if everybody's got a personal coach, the optimized individual that's going to help them, guide them, give them immediate feedback, and and to be that one-to-one coach for everyone. But obviously that's not scalable when we think about kind of, you know, universal democratized learning, kind of until now, right? And I think, again, using this example, this is a hospitality client we're working with in the US. So at the moment we are digitizing their best expertise on their way of working. So, you know, one of our clients, Levy, and it's, in essence, we're shooting 100 videos or 100 to 200 videos, which is the bite-sized expertise of how they do business, how they make drinks, how they want to talk to clients. So everything that's great about their organization is codified for the best people in the organization in a suite of videos that goes into the platform. Now, traditionally, they would only be available in 2 formats, but they would be put into a structured learning path, sequential. They'd be available in that bite-sized YouTube, let me find that video and get back to it. But now what the AI does, it adds this third element towards it, which is combining everything that's been said or done with inside all of those hundreds of videos via the transcript into an AI coach. That's the collective intelligence of the Fuse way. Sorry, not the Fuse way, of the Levy way. Levy way, sorry, I keep pronouncing the name wrong. So the Levy way would then be any question you're asking, for example, is what's the perfect way to make a mojito? That's not coming from the external web, that's their way of doing it. You know, how do you flip a hamburger? How do you make a hot dog? How do you talk to clients? So it's their way that's available as that 24/7 coach, whether that's a frontline person, that's a line manager. And I find that, you know, tremendously exciting, right? And I do think this is a type of thing, along with the other things we've been seeing, that really makes learning technologies something that's business valuable, rather than it be that kind of thing on the side that people go to because they're beaten to go to for compliance. So yeah, really a really exciting part. And again, I think if we look at then the second version, so first version is what you see on the screen. Second version then is how we start to then use all those things we talked about to really personalize that. So by default already, that coach will be personalized to language, to job role, to the content that's available for that individual. But where we can go next is things like neurodiversity, literary level, in a pretty, when we say next, we're talking weeks and months rather than years, because of the speed that AI allows us to innovate on. And maybe this last piece here, the last few minutes. So if I think about, again, these two audiences, right? And I think, again, with Lynn and Ritu on board, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, right? So we've talked a lot about that frontline worker. And if I think about L&D especially, we can obviously divide the needs of L&D into these two halves. You know, your frontline worker and your head office workers. And the use of AI is radically different how it can help each one. So the frontline worker is the type of stuff we talked about, you know, the ability to get someone up to speed, help them do their job, help them to complete tasks in a more effective way. And generally, it's easier to do that because there's normally just a few roles, like drivers or retail staff or engineers. So it's easier to do that piece en masse. Harder to do that on a mass piece in the head office piece. And that's probably a different challenge when we think about our challenge in the office. Is much about, you've got hundreds of different roles, tens of thousands of courses, and how do you help each person, recommending them the next thing they need to progress their career. And maybe just to pause on that, right? So again, just to come out to Lynn and Ritu, love to hear your voice, because often people talk about one or the other, and just to hear your reflections upon that part and the needs of both.
One or the other in terms of sort of frontline or
Well, yeah,
office.
I think we get excited a lot about frontline, right? And again, I know you've now been a 2-time client, right? Historically, we weren't so good at the head office piece, right? We were brilliant at the frontline piece. But the need of the head office person is quite different to the retail person, let's say the frontline person.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. You know, you've got multiple functions, and then within that, lots of different roles, and really importantly, sometimes singular roles. So that point around where can I go if I'm doing my job for help or support? You haven't necessarily got another person who is doing that job. So I feel like there is a massive opportunity in terms of helping individual roles as well as smaller teams really access content, knowledge, information, and learn as they're doing their jobs. And I think traditionally, if we look at learning platforms before, it was much more directed to frontline, because generally speaking, they are doing the same roles and the same processes in the same way, and we can all cope with that. It's really difficult to wrap our heads around that as L&D professionals for 3,000 different roles doing different things. So I think there is this real opportunity to really respond to an individual need, not just around that individual job, but preference, location, language as well, and to continue to build that knowledge base in a very dynamic way. So I do think that AI is a real unlocker within a platform, much more than it ever could have been before, because we as L&D professionals or HR professionals just couldn't, find a way to do that in a more traditional way.
And I think I'll just do 1 minute, and then I want to go to the questions, right? So with the last few minutes that we have left, and just to talk about that head office part. So again, with that challenge, which is loads of different roles, loads of complexity, it's a much more complex solution to do. So this, I think, again, is where AI is helping us, so that we can match, let's say, the skills gap in individual. So on the screen, you might have, in my case, a skills gap and active listening, problem solving, theoretically active listening, obviously not real, just a theoretical concept there. But say those are my 4 skill gaps on the page, then obviously what we want is a technology to then understand that and then match and say, to help you with your career path, here's the next things that we want to get to. And then to give us this recommendation based upon potentially skills tags, which is what we did move to, but also now that we understand so much more in this new AI index, not limited to that stuff as well. So this concept of automatically tagging, understanding, and allowing that career pathing place to happen in an automated type way. So what I'd love to do is just, for the last few minutes, just maybe get some of these questions come out here. There wasn't a question, but there was a nice comment, Ritu, from Javier, who's saying, I've connected heavily with what Ritu said based on that. And then from your side, I know this is a nice plug for your opportunity for you, Ritu. Any recommendations of where you can learn more about what you talked about?
Yeah, you can come to us. We can provide an accessibility framework to help you think around how do you make content more accessible.
And you're actually in a range of actually creating a range of content, I think, in this area, right?
Yeah, so we have our own platform, and it specializes in neurodiversity. So, content around education around neurodiversity, as well as assessments around neurodiversity and data insights, because it's the biggest piece of the protected characteristics in diversity inclusion that is moving forward now, and people need to understand more about their workforce and therefore how to enable learning for that workforce. So we're providing a great piece of data insight around neurodivergence within a workforce. But I think I plugged our website. I'll do it again. I plugged our website in the chat, but I'll do it again.
No, yeah, feel free to. And there's, apart from Coco, but hopefully we've answered some of that, right? Which was, can we speak more to the 10%? And I think there's probably, like I said, there's 3 elements to that formal learning, the 10% piece. I think, as a question I asked earlier on, how can I just simply say, I want to learn about X, Y, Z, like I want to, like the Matrix style, I want to learn how to fly a helicopter, and it creates a path, but based on a personalized path, based on what I know, don't know, right? So, that there, I think the technology is there to do, and it's just now what we're doing is creating the interface for that over the weeks and months to come. I think the second element is improving that formal learning by having that personal coach on the side. And I think normally, whenever you're learning, you always want to say, well, I didn't quite get that. Can you explain that again? Explain it in a different way. So having that coach on the side alongside your formal learning, I think is the second big piece of that. And then I think realistically what we are doing is, in the background in R&D, we are blowing the whole thing up. With AI now, we don't have to have a sequential path anymore. So now I think there's what we're challenging our thinking on is that sense, we designed e-learning as we did in a sequential logical sequence because that's what we could do. We didn't have a flexible enough technology. We're not limited in that way anymore, that we're now able to have a fluid path based upon each individual. And that's what we're prototyping in the background to see how far we can push that. And then I think the most important question was from Nee, on a lighter note, and nobody seems to talk about it, but I often imagine young employees falling in love with a well-designed Gen AI assistant. I think that's just the reality of the future, though, isn't it? It was slightly worrying when I got twins that are 11 and a 12-year-old. It is worrying of whether they're going to end up falling in love with a person that's going to agree with them all the time. And I think on that note, we're coming kind of to the end. I think it was maybe the last question from Magdalena. How do you check knowledge level from example distributor to see that they're knowledgeable to sell our products? Look, I think we're not getting rid of formal learning. We're just saying it's going to change, right? So knowledge checks, obviously, so inside Fuse, for example, we have those knowledge checks, we have observational checks, so checking someone's behavior, we have comprehension assessments, but again, we see AI changing all of those as well. So a comprehension assessment right now is a pretty much manual task. So somebody uploads, they're maybe showing them how they're assembling a product. or pitching a product if you're a salesperson. Obviously now with AI, we can take a lot of that pain away of having to go through every bit of content and mark that content, and allow the AI to reference what good looks like and say, yeah, comparison to what great looks like, this is how we're going to auto assess you, and therefore allow some of that comprehension assessments to be done at scale. But again, you still need, I think the whole point here, right, and I think as Lynn said earlier on, is this is a big change, right? Just like mobile phones, or from classroom to digital learning was a big jump. Mobile phones was a big jump. The internet was a big jump. This is a jump, right? We're all still here. We're all going to have jobs, but and we're not all going to have AI chips planted in our heads. But it is an evolution, and it is something just like everything else that we have to grab on and get on top of the horse and understand how it helps us, rather than put maybe our head in the sand. Any final comments, Lynn, Ritu, from you guys?
No, I think you can do it well.
For me, I think AI is awesome. We're still yet to see the power of its awesomeness. And the only comment I'd like to say is let's include digital accessibility within that. So let's really truly make it an inclusive place for everybody, not only in terms of translated languages, but in terms of inclusive language, in terms of the way people think and the way they absorb information.
Final words from you, Lynn?
No, just go for it, embrace it. It's the future.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, guys. Thanks for everyone that was part of it. Thank you, obviously, especially for the contributions from Ritu and Lynn there. Hope you had a good time. Hopefully that was beneficial, and hopefully the people on it got some value from the knowledge that was given, the conversations that you allowed us to have. So thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.